The heart of man is evil, and this particular case depicts the level of wickedness that resides in the hearts of men. South Africa. Renowned for its varied topography, great natural beauty, and cultural diversity, is one of the most favored destinations for travelers. With three main capitals, namely, Cape Town, Pretoria and Bloemfontein, it has everything a country should have. Unfortunately, a high crime rate is one thing the beautiful country has, and in December of 1994, a gruesome crime was committed in the city of Port Elizabeth, South Africa. On the evening of December 18, 1994, 27-year-old Alison Botha returned to her apartment after dropping a friend off. The day had been perfect as she had spent it with her friends at a beach in Port Elizabeth. When the evening came, Alison invited them over to her apartment for pizza and drinks. The group of friends had chatted some more and played a game of balderdash. Soon after, her friends began to leave one by one until it was just Alison and Kim. Alison had promised to drop Kim off, and around midnight, she drove her friend to her house and the two bid each other goodbye. Alison got back to her apartment at around 1 a.m., but when she got to the spot where she usually parked, someone else had parked their car there. Already tired and not willing to make an issue out of it, Alison decided to find somewhere else to park for the night. She found a place within walking distance from her apartment. It was a space under a big tree, big enough to block the street lights on an already poorly lit road. Unknowingly to her, she was being watched. She had just reached over to her passenger seat to pick up a basket of clean laundry when she suddenly felt a gust of warm air. Her car door had been opened, and standing before her was a scrawny but tall young man with blonde hair. She immediately spotted a knife in his hand. He told her to move over else he would kill her. She did exactly just that, and he got into the driver's seat. He put his foot on the accelerator and off they went. After a few moments he assured her he wasn't going to hurt her but only wanted to borrow her car for an hour. At that point, Alison believed him. During the ride, Alison considered jumping out the moving car but was so scared that she remained frozen. She begged the man, who had introduced himself as Clinton, to take the car and leave her. But he refused. Clinton, whose real name was Frans du Toit, drove them to one of the main streets in Port Elizabeth and spotted the person he was looking for. He told him, a man who he called the Uns, to jump in and meet his new friend, Alison. The three drove to an entirely deserted area, on the outskirts of Port Elizabeth, where her family had always warned her to steer clear of. By this time, Alison already knew they were going to do something sinister to her. Clinton, who was driving, stopped the car in the bush. The two men told Alison they were going to have sex with her and there was no need to shout for help because no one would hear her or come to her rescue. They asked her if she was going to fight, and Alison, not knowing how to fight and clearly scared for her life, told them no. The two men, who had a history of violence against women, both raped her. And they were soon determined to kill her as well. At first, they tried to suffocate her. But even though she lost consciousness, Alison clung to life. Frustrated, Frans du Toit and the Uns Kruger took their brutality to the next level. They stabbed her at least 30 times in the abdomen. Alison later recalled that Frans specifically wanted to mutilate her reproductive organs. But somehow, the attackers missed those specific parts of her body. When Alison's leg twitched, Frans du Toit and the Uns Kruger decided the job wasn't quite done yet. They then went ahead to slit her throat 16 times. Alison Botha later recalled, "All I could see was an arm moving above my face, left and right and left and right. His movements were making a sound. A wet sound. It was the sound of my flesh being slashed open. He was cutting my throat with the knife. Again and again and again. This is so gory that the thought of it sends chills down my spine, and I cannot imagine how she felt in that moment. As the men finally stepped back, Alison heard them admiring their work and speaking in Afrikaans. "Do you think she's dead?" one of the attackers asked. "No one can survive that," the other replied. The men decided to leave her there once they were sure she wasn't going to live, and drove away. Barely holding on to life but still breathing, Alison was determined not to die there without leaving a clue about who did this to her. She was lying on sand and decided to leave the clue on the sand. She wrote down the names of her attackers in the sand, and below that wrote, "I love Mom." Alison laid there for a while, waiting for death, but she soon realized something. She could see headlights streaking through the bushes from a distance. In her head, she thought, if she could just drag herself to the road, then someone might be kind enough to help her. As she pulled herself up to slowly move to the roadside, she realized the full extent of her injuries. Her head started to fall backwards, as she had nearly been decapitated. She could also feel something slimy protruding from her stomach, her intestines. She had to use one hand to keep her organs from spilling out and the other hand to hold on to her own head. Her sight faded in and out, and she fell many times but managed to reach the side of the road and collapsed there. Fortunately, Alison didn't have to wait for long. A young veterinary student named Tyan Eilert, who was visiting Port Elizabeth on vacation from Johannesburg, saw Alison lying in the middle of the road and stopped. He used his veterinary training to tuck her exposed thyroid back inside her body. Then, he called emergency services for help. Alison Botha was rushed to the hospital, where doctors were stunned by her horrific wounds. Thankfully, she survived. She remembered everything and was soon able to identify her attackers from the pictures police showed her while she was still in the hospital. This led to the arrest of the two men swiftly named the Ripper Rapists by the press. The subsequent Noordhoek Ripper trial captured the attention of South Africans everywhere. Both Frans du Toit and Jans Kruger pled guilty to 8 charges, which included kidnapping, rape, and attempted murder. They were both found guilty and sentenced to life in prison in August 1995. However, Alison's story didn't end there. She struggled with serious depression following her attack, and could not work. She knew this event had changed her irreparably, and did not know how to move forward. She needed an outlet, and so Alison began traveling around the world, telling her story. She became the first South African woman to speak publicly about the experience of rape, home and abroad, and in 1995, won the prestigious Rotarian Paul Harris Award for Courage Beyond the Norm. In the same year, she received Femina magazine's Woman of Courage Award, and was announced Port Elizabeth Citizen of the Year. For many years, it was unclear if Alison would be able to have children, given the extent of the injuries sustained by her female organs. But in 2003, 9 years after the attack, Alison gave birth to a son named Daniel. 3 years later, she had Matthew. Her story was made into a documentary in 2016. The documentary recreates the horrific experiences that she experienced that night and highlights the miracle of her survival. Alison herself took a keen interest in sharing her story with the world. Now, 28 years since she nearly lost her life in deserted bushland in Port Elizabeth, Alison is widely considered one of South Africa's most inspiring figures. It is amazing how she didn't let the horrific ordeal stop her from achieving greatness. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. And please, turn on the notification bell, so you get notified whenever I upload a new video.